Well, alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex
and Diva.
And we are so excited
excited
to hang out with you guys. This is going to be we're going to try to make this one a short episode.
We have to make it a short episode.
Yeah.
I have work to get to after.
Yes, you have work,
I'm so
I have
excited.
work.
I'm hosting a play date today for a bunch of 4-year-olds at work.
Yeah.
So that's so exciting.
You are so good with young people. Matter of fact, you called us after a small group that you lead on Saturdays for middle school girls. You got a group of about 10 girls, and that has been really fun for you and them so far. So really excited for you.
We were it's all about learning how to make godly friendships. And so part of what it was, the lesson Saturday, was learning how to allow yourself to be interrupted and how to interrupt others, like checking in on them, being like, not just getting so caught up in your own life to like not check in on your friends, but also allowing yourself to like be interrupted when they would need you like to check on them or need help from you and things. And so part of what we did was we made friendship bracelets, but the friendship bracelets didn't go to your best friend. They went to somebody you were trying to be friends with or somebody you passed in the halls or sat next to in class every day. And it was really special. Well, some of the girls got the idea. They said we should practice like doing something uncomfortable by giving them to the Chick-fil-A workers. And so they made friendship bracelets for every Chick-fil-A worker they could find. And the manager and people from the back and the drive-through people were coming in and they were like so excited. They're like, can you make me one? But the kids at first found it incredibly awkward to like go up and ask them, hey, could I made you this friendship bracelet. But then after they realized that people just really liked the genuine like act of kindness, they became more comfortable interrupting somebody and saying, hi, I made this for you. I hope you like it and things. And so it was really special because it got to watch them become more comfortable. And I think it helped them. I've already heard back from a couple of the girls that they've gone out and done something and given it to one of their friends and things. And so it was really sweet.
That's awesome, Eva. That reminds me of one of our earlier episodes. I have no idea which one it was, but I remember the theme was, a big theme in that one was, hey, just be nice to people. Yep. There's so much disagreement. We mention that almost, it seems like, every episode. And I am going to tell you a quick story that you haven't even heard yet. Okay. Let me give the topic today, but I'm going to do a pig trail before we get to the topic because I think it's so good about this whole theme of, hey, can we just manage to be nice to people and tone some of the rhetoric down? But the topic we're going to talk about today is actually, hey, what is the definition of success? What does that mean to the different generations and how has it changed? But check this out. I was listening to talk radio this morning on the way to an appointment, and they were talking about how distraught that some people are over the DOJ commission and agency. I'm not even sure what the official name of that is, but we know the country's pretty much divided over that, like everything else. Hey, they're uncovering inefficiencies, but they're going about it possibly the wrong way. The uncovering or the access to private personal information. I get all that. That's part of the debate. But check this out. People have gone so far off the rails on both sides of the argument that a guy called in and he said, hey, just to let you know how crazy and how out of control this is getting, he said, I have a daughter who attended Elon University in North Carolina. That's a well-known university, by the way. It has nothing to do with Elon Musk.
Are they changing their name?
No, they're not changing their name that we know of. But check this out. The dad happened to be at Walmart, and he had on a Elon University sweatshirt, and it just says Elon. That's all it says. Yeah. Well, he went out to his car, and somebody had taken a sticky note and pasted it on his side view mirror. Hey, they're coming, and they called him a very derogatory term. They said, hey, blankety blank. He's coming after your Social Security. And the guy thought, who in the world wrote this? And then he realized that it was somebody that saw his Elon sweatshirt and just drew the wrong conclusion. Yeah. And he was calling into the radio station making the point of, hey, regardless of which side you fall on these arguments, these disagreements, can we please stop drawing conclusions and incorrect narratives about everything.
Yep.
Anyway, I thought it was really interesting.
Well, that's a big thing I'm touching in my thesis right now is about the Department of Education and how I think it has a place in the government and everything. And I've talked to tons of teachers about it, and then they're like, they hate it at first. And then I tell them like why I think we need it. They're like, oh, okay. But I see, because I now, like, I talk about my thesis so much, which is on the education system. I get so much information about it.
Yeah.
And it's like the absolute just like governmental hate people have.
Yep.
It's very interesting that like the same people that are, all for the government having more control, just I feel like that whole argument and sometimes is just like it's only if it's the people you like. And I feel like that's where the issue is. That's what I'm finding in my thesis is I have to be really careful when reading the political documents to make sure that they're not opinionated.
Right.
And it's very hard. It's very hard to find them like just truly neutral documents that talk about a policy or system I'm looking at just from their statistics. And it's crazy. They make a lot of assumptions about people in them.
Yep. It is an extremely difficult environment right now. I actually kind of thrive in this environment because I consider myself, again, a centrist. We've talked about this. I listen to both sides of the argument. And you know what? For my conservative friends, you really make some great points about a lot of issues. And likewise, some of my liberal friends, you know what? Even though I tend to lean a little bit conservative, liberals are capable of making some valid points, and we don't have to argue and debate and really fight. I'm going to call it verbally fight, which is what we do in this country. And you just said it. A lot of times it's based on personality. If we don't like this particular person, I'm going to use the word, we go insane and we lose the ability to have a rational, reasonable conversation. Yeah. So you don't have to lie. You and I in the podcast, we've learned a lot about each other. And there are times, that you're kind of smiling. There are times I'm like, Eva, just flow with me on this. We've had to learn how to engage each other, how to react to each other.
How to hear the words, I don't like that episode topic. Let's choose something different.
Yeah, let's go with something different. And I'm like, okay, if she doesn't, there's a great tip. If you tell me in advance, hey, Dad, I don't like that topic. Well, that's a no-brainer for me to go, you know what? I need to pick a different topic, because if you don't like the topic and I insist that you talk about it anyway, guess what that episode's going to be? Terrible.
We're going to get 10 minutes in and I'm going to be like, I really hate this. And then I'll hang up and he'll get mad. It's all right. We've had that happen before too.
We have.
Anyway, success.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So you want me to give a little bit of background? Yeah. Okay. Here's really where I think we are with this. Used to, if you look at people in my generation, boomers, actually, I had a millennial tell me this. We were just having a rational conversation one day. And he said, your generation, basically what you guys did, you just said, work and keep your nose to the grindstone. And that's it. That's really all there is to life. And I thought, well, that's kind of abrupt. And I thought, well, okay. Well, I went and thought about it a little bit, and then I called him back and I said, hey, let's follow that conversation a little bit further. I said, maybe that was your narrative that you drew from my generation, but I don't think every person in my generation gave your generation the advice, hey, just work, keep your nose to the grindstone and everything will work out. I said, I think it's deeper than that, but it started this conversation between an older guy and a younger guy where we were trying to determine some of the differences that are maybe that they are generational, because I think
the worldview, like we talked about in the last episode, is the worldview. He looks at the world and how he views work and success makes yours look so much more strict. Whereas your generation looks at the worldview, has the worldview of, you work a 9 to 5, you retire at 65, all these things, which was what was standard. And they look at us now and they go, oh, well, they're lazy. They don't work a desk job. They don't do these things, which doesn't mean that they're not successful and don't have their own careers. It's just changed so much. It's all about like what we talk about. You just have to find a way to bridge the gap in success, essentially.
Right. Right. And I love that thought because you and I talk about this a lot. We even had the conversation yesterday, if you remember, about people that are night owls and people that are early birds. Well, I'm an early bird. Well, used to that was not only kind of an advantage, it was kind of the norm because of the flow of business. Businesses in the workplace opened at a certain hour. You were looked as being on top of it. If you got in 30 minutes to an hour early, the rhythm of the world just worked differently because it was not totally internet based.
Yep.
All right, let's fast forward 20, 30 years. The truth is the world works on a different rhythm. The world is more connected. It's 24/7. So you can be in New York doing business online with someone in China or Russia, or whatever the case is. You get the point. But the environment simply has changed. And so just because your personal rhythm, you may be a night owl, but people that are like me, that are early birds, we can no longer make the assumption, well, they're just lazy because they stayed up so late and they got up late. No, that's their rhythm. And if it works for them and the business that they're in, fantastic.
Yep. Like my teacher, right? You think, oh, a teacher, their job is 7:30 to 3:30. No, my teacher, bless his heart, my senior thesis teacher, bless his heart, I checked my phone at like 7 a.m. Monday morning, and I had 5 notifications from Canvas, which is our grading system, that my assignments had been graded at 2, 3, 4, and 5 a.m. I don't know if he got up really early or if he didn't go to sleep, but you know where he was that morning? At 8:30, he was teaching a class. And I'm like, that's changed so much because of technology, right? He takes off once his classes are off, and he spends time with his kids until they go to bed. And then he goes to work, or he gets up at a super ungodly hour. We got an email from him one year, and he goes, that feeling when you wake up at 3:30 in the morning to try and get some grading done before classes because your students need it, and you access the documents and all your students are still online. He was like, go to bed, people. And it was like, if people dressed in class, they were like, you need to go to bed too. He's like, I went to bed at 7 when my kids went to bed and things. And so it was like, some nights it's funny because we'll get like some of my teachers, I'll get feedback from them, and it's like 3:30 in the morning, and then we'll ask them about it in the class, and they'll be like, oh, I couldn't sleep, so I just decided to do some work. And I'm like, that's not something that a lot of people are probably used to seeing, and I think it's just very interesting.
It is interesting. And so here's what I'm going to say in terms of a transition statement as we try to define, hey, what is success and what is it in this current culture? I think that you have to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And that would seem, well, no duh, but you know what? Sometimes we fail to ask relevant questions. And I know especially in my generation, sometimes people will start giving advice assuming that younger people are asking specifically for financial advice in the long game. How do I create X amount of income if I want to retire at such and such age? Okay, that's a standard narrative that's been created over the years.
We just want to know how to afford rent.
There you go. Your generation specifically, you're struggling with how do we afford rent? How do we afford to live? How do we afford to live in these metropolitan areas? That goes back to a new article that was just published. Americans may have to embrace the ideal, which is total countercultural here, multi-generational living.
Yep.
Well, the Asian American culture, they've been doing that for years, specifically Asian Indians.
Yep.
That it's multi-generational living by necessity. Well, if our economy doesn't improve, we may have to embrace what's called generational living. That's a whole different subject. But the narrative is, hey, we've got to change our mindset on some of these things to include success. So here's what I would say about it. Back to the question. What's the insight? Stephen Covey wrote this in 7 Habits of Highly Successful People years ago, and I don't remember what habit it was. I think it's number 2. But decide in advance what the end state is. What is your desired result, the desired outcome? And so if you don't want a second home, if you don't want a vacation home or a beach house or a lake house, it doesn't do a lot of good to start talking about long-term IRAs and 401ks. And I'm not telling people to disregard those or embrace those either way, but you got to ask the questions in advance. What is the outcome that I want specifically out of my life? And so what would you say as a younger person? This is a great question for you at 18. What do you, and I know it'll change a little bit, Eva, But what are you thinking in terms of the outcome for you and measuring, hey, what is success for my life?
Well, I know that a lot of my generation, I'll just go general first and then I'll kind of narrow it down to me personally, but my generation, a lot of them are becoming more and more of like less family oriented, like not necessarily like marriage is okay, which I know is a whole, like, there's a whole argument on that. Or, I don't need a ton of kids. I don't need this big house. I'm fine living in an apartment or in a condo the rest of my life because that's all I need. I want to have the money to go travel. I feel like my generation, a lot of us are not a sedentary generation. We don't like the idea of sitting at a 9-to-5 job and answering phone calls and sending emails in a cubicle. We like the idea of going and interacting with people or traveling and getting to kind of have more freedom over our schedule. We like flexible work schedules. We like not having super strict hours because, like we said, with morning people, if I can get the same job done from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. as I can at 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., but my productivity goes up because it's later in the day, I function better than everything, everybody's happier. And so it's things like that I think are becoming more normal. I think that's kind of more of a success, is not so much of a how much money do you have at retirement, it's how happy are you, how much did you achieve the goals you had set, did you go the places you wanted to go, did you make good friends along the way. It's become more about a journey. It's not so much of a singular, I'm making as much money as I can so that the last 10-15 years of my life I can finally do everything I've wanted to do. It's no, I take every opportunity I can now to do what I want. I want to have money in savings at 18, at 19, at 20 to go traveling and go do things because I don't want to wait until I'm 70 to do it. I don't want to wait until I struggle going upstairs to go, hike up the mountains in Peru or something like that, because that's something I want to do now. So I want to have the ability to do so. And so I think success has become a short-term goal now. I think it's defined more on a short-term scale than it is on the long-term scale that it used to be, because I think we kind of live for more personal, relational achievements than we do monetary ones. And so personally for me, I want a family one day. I would like to have kids. I would like to own my own house. I would like to live in the city or in the suburbs. The country is not for me. And so I know that as a teacher, that's going to be hard to do because they don't get paid a lot. That's what I'm going to do, all those things. And so I'm like, okay, so where am I going to be able to live? Where am I going to be able to have a family? What kind, all these things that I have to think about, but those are very short-term goals. I have not thought about retirement. I've not thought about, things aren't one day I'm going to go see Australia. It's no, I would like to, the first chance that I get to go see Australia, I would like to go see it. It's not so much of I put it off on the side until I have the standard means of it. It's okay, I have enough money for this, I'm going to go do it. Like in college, I want to study abroad. I want to take every opportunity to go see things. It may not make the most sense for me to graduate late. It may not make the most sense for me to do this and delay working. But if I have that opportunity to go do that, I'm going to take it now. You see more people quitting their jobs to go start a passion project or to go travel for a year, because once they make enough money to complete a short-term goal, the jobs are still there. Right? We don't have to be tied to a desk. People are still always in need of a job or in need of hiring people. And so there's not these long-term commitments to things as much as there used to be.
I love it. And there were several key words that you said during that narrative. One of them was happiness.
Yeah.
You're looking at that. I don't know that you said the word significance, but you and I have talked about that a lot. I think that matter of fact, there was a book written back in the early 2000s called The Search for Significance, became a bestseller. But I think the concepts in it are valid because people even then, 20 years ago, were so frustrated with this conversation about financial success. And the real question is, how am I going to make a difference? How am I going to achieve a life of significance, not just success? And so anyway, there's a lot of books. Matter of fact,
I do want to add that too.
Okay.
I think there's a trend of a lot of people wanting to make money quick, right? They want to make money quick because they want to enjoy it while they're young, while they have it, because they don't want to wait. And so I think there's also a part of success, the change in it has been success isn't defined by your ability to be consistent working a job either. And so I think if you look at it, most young people, they have side hustles. They have things they're doing all, on the other things. That job they work, they have they're not looking for their job to be their family. It's becoming a place they go because they need that consistent income, but they're doing what they love on the outside of it. That's where their heart is. And so once that becomes successful, the desk job isn't important anymore. And so there is no long-term commitment. I think that's why a lot of companies are hurting too. There's just not long-term commitment to companies anymore like there used to be.
Yeah. And those are great points. And I think we're in a time crunch today. So in order to be significant, you've got to move out to your next appointment. But we're going to do a part 2, but I'm going to give people a teaser. I had 4 books that I wanted to just briefly talk about. We will talk about them and their key points on the next episode. But here's the teaser. Halftime made a tremendous difference on me. I've mentioned it before. Search for Significance. Intentional Living by John Maxwell. And then since I mentioned Stephen Covey, we'll go ahead and throw that one out on the table too, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then there's another one that I always like to talk about. We'll come back and discuss some specific passages in it. When you start talking about the movement from success to significance, you better research the Bible and see what it has to say. So anyway, I love it. That being said, regardless of what happens, let's always remember to talk from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed our episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review because it helps people who don't know about us hear our message. And if you want to follow us on our socials, follow us at G2G_podcast on Instagram and Generation to Generation on Facebook.